Hello, everybody. It's great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, president, and founder of GSD Venture Studios, a premier AI and quantum venture studio located in Silicon Valley. And I'm the host of Simplenight AI Presents, where we explore how artificial intelligence is reshaping travel, tourism, and the global digital economy. Today's topic is one of many in the industry are worried about, but rarely discuss. Why tourism bureaus and ministries will continue to struggle with AI adoption. AI is already changing how travelers discover destinations, plan trips, and make decisions. Travelers are embracing personalization, real time recommendations, and predictive tools faster than ever. Yet, paradoxically, many of the organizations responsible for promoting destinations, tourism bureaus, and ministries are falling behind. At a time when the relevance, funding, and even existence are under pressure, many remain strategically and tactically unprepared for AI. And the reason go far beyond technology. Weak talent pipelines, deeply embedded traditions, and biased or politically appointed boards, and short term political influence that undermines long term digital strategy. But today, we're going to unpack why this gap exists and what it means for the future of tourism. So today, I'm joined by Frank Belzer, a seasoned leader with years of experience across travel, tourism, hospitality, and attraction. Frank has led senior leadership positions at Universal Parks, serves on board including Visit Florida and Grand Canyon Resort, and worked with organizations like Margaritaville, their cruise division. He's also vied travel technology companies like Kindu and Applied Silver, and is regular contributor to leading industry publication. Frank, I'd like to welcome you to the show. Hi, Frank.
Hi, Gary. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So, Frank, let's start with the big picture.
Sure.
Travelers are adopting AI tools at record speed, yet tourism bureaus are clearly lagging behind. From your perspective, why has this disconnect become so pronounced and so relevant?
Well, I think it's interesting because if you ask tourism bureaus, they would tell you that they're focused on AI. And it's a very, very hot topic. They say it's one of their top initiatives. The challenge, I think, goes deeper than that, in that they're still working on a strategy and a playbook that's from the mid '80s. They've just barely came around in many cases to using digital marketing, and they're just getting caught up on influencer marketing, and now you've got AI coming out, and the way they operate is just, it's too antiquated to support. They've kind of patched these other new methods onto their framework, but it's not going to work with AI. They're not going to be able to implement any viable solutions. And the other thing that's happening is travelers are adjusting to I think everybody thought there was going to be backlash and that travelers weren't going to like being taken care of by AI. But the reality is, when it does a better job than a person, people adjust pretty quick. And so on one hand, you've got a lot of people, I think, wondering, do we even need these entities anymore? Since customers they're so enabled with AI now in the marketplace, do they even need these groups to do what they used to do?
So, Frank, do you think many tourism organizations still underestimate just how fast traveler expectations are changing? So they're not up to speed with what the travelers expect. What do you think?
I think so, because I think they're still doing a lot of stuff that's about awareness and getting supposedly people to think about traveling to their marketplace or their destination, but they don't realize how quickly now that used to take. There used to be a huge gap, right? Someone would have this sort of anticipation stage. They would become aware of a destination. They would think about it, and then it might be months before they start taking action. Well, guess what? That's not happening now. Not on most websites. Most websites are incentivizing you to take action the minute you think about something. And most of what's being served up to you is being served up with a pretty powerful call to action, where you can book your flight, your hotel, everything else pretty quickly. So where tourism boards are struggling is they've never offered that second piece. They've never offered a transactional part of the business. They've shied away from it because they didn't want to offend their partners. Or as you mentioned in the intro, it's pretty hard when you've got a board made up of people who are, you've got someone from Expedia and Booking and everything else on your board. They don't want you doing a transaction. They want you giving that transaction to them. So they're going to fight and they're going to resist any type of idea that might end up with the tourism entity doing any kind of transactions. But they need to become self-sustaining. And in order for them to become self-sustaining, they've got to start doing more than they've been doing for the last 30 or 40 years.
So do you think that the bureaus are really looking at AI as a marketing experiment rather than a core strategic capability? And why is this really a dangerous assumption for them? And by the way, it's not just the travel. I see it all the time across multiple vertical industries. They don't realize, Frank, they're going to be dinosaurs if they don't do something about
it. That's right. They see it as an add-on, right? They see it as an add-on. They see it as something that they can plug into their existing strategy. And you're exactly right. It is not just travel. It's all kinds of entities and all kinds of verticals that are dealing with this. I think travel has stands out to me, A, because I'm familiar with it, and B, because it's always been sort of behind the eight ball. It's never been an industry that's full of early adopters. And, so you don't have, it's interesting because you've got a lot pushing against you, right? You've got a team of people. Typically, most of these entities are funded by governments in one way or another, whether that's at the national level, the state level, the city level. So they automatically don't pay their people what you could make in the private sector. So, you're making maybe 60% of what you could make for the same job in the private sector. So you're not getting the best talent. You're not getting people that are very progressive or early adopters. You're getting people that, are choosing the job for some other reason. So you don't have talent driving for this type of change. The boards are made up of people who have their own vested interests. When I was on the board of Visit Florida, I was working as an SVP at Universal Parks. Yeah, I was there to help Visit Florida, but let's be honest, it was very clear to me that if something came along on the agenda that was not in our best interest, I knew where I was supposed to vote for, right? So you've got the boards that don't really bestow power onto the entity unless it's in their interest. And then you've got the politicians. And you got the politicians who really see these entities as punching bags, and they don't have marketing experience. They don't have tourism and travel experience. None of them. So these entities become an easy target. And then you've got the actual population who support the entity, and they're sick of having, nobody loves having tourists in their neighborhood. Oh, they take all the parking spaces. Oh, they create traffic. It's a really tough gig. And to your point, if they're not adapting, making AI part of their core business, and helping them to be more efficient and more productive and smarter, they are really going to be in trouble. And anybody listening today, do a Google News search on tourism bureaus, and you will start to see throughout the United States, throughout the world, you'll see that they're under scrutiny more than ever. Governments are saying, do we need to fund Brand USA just had their cut. Trump just cut Brand USA's funding, which is the national sort of tourism bureau for the United States. He cut it by something like $150 million. It was like 180 million. It sounded like 30 million. Massive cut. That's happening across the board. They're all dealing with that. So if they don't get more efficient and smarter, start having better results, and start being able to actually show what they're doing from a transactional viewpoint, they're just going to have to go away. That's where it's going to end up.
Let's go back to the part of talent. So do you think that these tourism bureaus are trying to attract AI literate leaders in modern technologies, or are they ignoring it?
I think they want to have someone in the organization that they're scared of AI, right? So you've got to have your person there who understands it at least a little bit. So I think they're bringing people in to help them interpret and understand AI. Do I think they're bringing in like people at the CEO level or the leadership level who are really no, they're not. That's too much change for them and for most of their members, I'm sure. But so like you'd mentioned earlier, it's an add-on. It's something they're dabbling with, but there's not really wholesale examination of sort of the business model and looking at it as, okay, what should we be reinventing from the ground up? It's not being looked at in that way. It's being looked at as sort of a tool that they can add on to their current strategy and tactics.
It's interesting because recently at a 30,000 person plus insurance company, one of my friends happens to be an SVP at that company, and they asked me if I would talk to their board about AI. I couldn't believe how far back in time they are. They said, well, maybe it's not right time for us right now. We can wait. We got to understand it. And I went down through, and while they were doing this, I took 14 large language models, Frank. I took every piece of information that I got from my friend and everything on the website and started building plans for them. And I was going down through and I started to talk to them about it. Well, we don't need to do this right now. We can wait. I said, what about personalization for your customer? What about going down through in liability issues? Imagine if you did this. They just didn't get it. And it was like talking to a brick wall.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it, actually.
There's a lot of legacy businesses, and that's why I think tourism falls into it. Like you're right, insurance is probably another example where they you can wait. You can wait. You'll go out of business. You're going to be replaced by something else. But yeah, it's amazing that there's that kind of attitude still out there about it. It's not optional at this point, but people are treating it like it is.
In that same line, how much does institutional risk aversion, especially in publicly funded organizations, slow down innovation compared to the private sector?
Oh, massively. Because you've got if there's that concern of, if it goes wrong or if it makes a mistake or if it does this or if it does that, and you know what, that already was slowing down innovation. I remember Visit Florida had an ad campaign that was pretty cool, pretty well done. But governor's office looked at it and said, we don't want to advertise that, we don't want to feature that, we don't. So what was maybe an innovative and cool advertising campaign became blah. Well, that's happening, times 10,000 organizations around the world that are trying to be innovative. Even if you have someone within the company, within the organization that wants to be innovative and implement AI more holistically, there's a good chance that there's someone up the ladder that's just going to squash it. So that happens a couple times. People get scared, and a good example is influencer marketing, right? Influencer marketing took off, and it was the thing to do. And if you weren't doing it in the experience space, you knew you were losing out because people were looking at social media and making choices. But then Disney went and hired some guy who was a Nazi. I don't know if you remember the story. And it came out that he had some Nazi quotes. And all of a sudden, everybody who was using influencers everywhere, like, hit the brakes, like, stop. We can't risk that. And it was like one example, they should have vetted the guy better. They didn't. And so I think that's the same kind of thing. There's stuff out there that maybe people are there's nothing even improved, but I could see there being concern about, what happens if AI does this, or what happens if and they're not educated, they're not up to speed. But that fear, as you say, that just kills innovation. Absolutely kills it.
Frank, you served on boards, and you've been in those sessions. I remember myself. I took about 5 years off, still doing some of my startup stuff, but I went into one of the major computer companies, and I remember the day where we had a meeting to talk about a meeting to talk about a meeting. I'd never heard of anything like that in my life. And Frank, I had a legal pad there, and it was such nonsense. I was just scribbling notes, and they came up to me. So the president of the company came up to me and said, you seem to be very attentive on this. I really like it. And what do you think? And I didn't want to tell him exactly what I thought, because I thought this is probably not a career move. But I told him, and I ended up eventually getting 5 promotions. in the company. I thought, this is such nonsense that I couldn't believe it. Now, you've served on boards. How often do you think that these boards block progress simply because they don't understand the technology, the politics organization, or its implications?
Yeah, all the time, all the time. And they're also, most the way that look the way that, especially if we're talking about these tourism entities, for example, the way they pick the boards are picked from. They look for representatives who are part of their member organization. So everyone who says, yes, I want to sign on to be a full member of Visit Orlando, or I want to be a Visit New York person, or I want to be a Experience Canada person, they sign on to be members, they pay for their membership, and now they're in the pool to be considered for a board position. But once you're on that board, let's face it, like I said at the beginning, your goal is not necessarily for the betterment of the organization, even though, you might tell yourself that, and morally you might want to believe that. But the reality is you're going to vote in the way that best supports your business interests. It's just how it is. So what if these groups were, it would be really interesting to see what would happen if some of these groups would hire people who are in unrelated technology companies. It'd be very interesting to see some people from Salesforce or HubSpot or, Palantir, or these, some of these kind of executives on boards for some of these entities. And that's not what you currently have. The boards typically are made up of people who, if you look at the board for New York, you're probably going to see like the Bronx Zoo, you're going to see the Guggenheim, you're going to see people
exactly.
You see people from the destination. But it would be a different world if they started bringing in board members who have different experience or don't have, personal interests in what gets done or doesn't get done.
Yeah, no, you're right about it. So I'm out here and I'm talking about health tech and talking about my stem cells and that kind of thing. And I have some ultra high net worth families that I'm with, and we went out to dinner last night. It was interesting because they're talking about all the boards, like literally across the board, and they were asking me questions about AI. And on the other side, they don't know it, right? So they don't have hold on a second. They don't have the background in AI, and they haven't taken the time to learn about it. And so it's really hindering them.
Yeah.
So, if tourism bureaus fail to adapt, what actually happens? Do they lose relevance, control of the destination, the narrative of the destination, or funding? What happens?
I think they lose all those things. I think all those things will happen. I think, there's already a lot of questioning when I talk about the scrutiny they're under. There's a lot of people questioning sort of the value that they provide. And the one thing that they've been struggling with for now decades is the inability to provide evidence of true attribution, right? All you can do is say, hey, we did this PR event and we had this many people attend, we had this many clicks, we did this digital campaign, we had this many views. That's all they can do. They cannot attach anything that they do to financial closure, to closing, to a transaction. That all happens through all of the third parties that they're kind of supporting indirectly. But the most aggressive third party, or the third party that has the best AI and the best marketing, they're going to benefit from the awareness work that these guys do. So there's a lot of scrutiny about that because they're not able to put their finger on a dollar amount and say, we contributed this much to the economy. And the other thing that's hurting them is when I talk about those members, if you, and this is just me, it's a guesstimate, but if you look at some of these major cities who have tourism bureaus, let's pick one that I'm really not familiar with, just so I don't incriminate myself. Sao Paulo, Brazil. Let's say that there are 100,000 potential organizations, companies in that city that benefit from tourism in one way or another. Well, you'd like to see all 100,000 of those be members of Visit Sao Paulo because that would show that they see the value in the organization. But my guesstimate would be that just based on bureaus that I've worked with, my guesstimate would be, you're seeing less than 10%, maybe even only 5% of those entities that are companies that are members. So only 5% of the actual businesses that you're there to support see the value to being a member, even when the membership is almost free. So that also hurts you. So I think you're going to have more and more government officials, more and more companies to, question the value of membership, and governments question the value of the entity even existing. And, the funding is already being pulled away. And that's why, I think at Simplenight, one of the things we're trying to do is help those entities to create their own revenue stream, to create a source of funding, so that they can continue and they can prove their worth, by actually transacting, which is, you think they would be jumping at that, wouldn't you? Because it's just an opportunity to really close that marketing loop. You're spending all this money on marketing. Wouldn't it be nice if you could also get some transactions out of that?
One of the things, Frank, you're right on target with it. One of the things when I've talked to people about Simplenight is they don't know what they don't know. That's the other thing. They don't know the possibilities exist, right? And so, some of the reasons that we're doing the shows just like this is to bring it out. But do you think those destinations are already losing influence to private platforms, OTAs,
of course,
and AI?
Guaranteed. Yes, no doubt. No doubt that's happening already. And the big players are, they're smart enough. They're probably, if you think about the way AI works now, you can actually track what's being done in the marketplace. You don't have to hire somebody; you can just track it. And if you're one of the big commercial players, and you see that, wow, look, Visit Bermuda is doing all this stuff, might be a good time for me to promote Bermuda. Might be good for me to put a pixel on all those people, and that can all be happening in the background, and you can basically walk around and sort of just pick up the scraps that these bureaus are leaving behind, from their marketing spend. It's not now they could be doing that themselves, but as we've said, they're not. So that's one of the crazy things. Like, to your point, yes, there's a lot of third parties who have, I think, picked up on the opportunity to sort of ride in their wake, and generate revenue.
And what happens politically in an organization? So right now, what kind of things are they telling each other when they don't know why things are happening like that, going down? How do they justify it politically? It's got to be tough.
Well, it's tough, but you also have macro stuff happening that is always very easy to blame, right? So it's always very easy to say, oh well, I read something just this morning that overall global travel is up, but a place like Las Vegas is down to 2000 numbers. It's down, hasn't been this low in 20 something years. So it's always very easy to look at that and say, oh well, it's the macro political stuff. It's the violence. It's Trump saying this on television. It's the expense related to visas now, things that have changed, and that's all true. That's all going to have an effect. But that's going to have an effect. That's a long tail item. People stopped planning to go to Vegas, not back in July or May or people stopped planning to go to Vegas long before that, and for us to see that kind of effect. That's a massive drop off, and they should have been able to see that happening, long before Trump. But now they're able just to blame all the things happening on Trump. So I think that's been it. The culture has always been supportive of blaming something else. It's oil prices. Oh, it's the red tide. Oh, it's the hurricane. Oh, it's the So as long as you've got something happening bad in the world, that's what typically gets blamed for numbers not being there. But other companies, the private sector doesn't have those kind of swings, or people would be losing jobs, companies would be downsizing. There'd be a different reaction. Could you imagine could you imagine like a privately owned or a commercial venture that says, oh, we're back down to the same numbers we had in 2000.
Yeah, nothing good would happen. Let me tell you,
nothing good would happen. No,
nothing good. So do you think, Frank, it's realistic to say that some tourism organizations simply won't survive the next 5 years?
Absolutely, yeah.
Real AI fluency.
Yeah, some will not survive. Some have legacy agreements that are going to keep them afloat for a while. I'll give you an example. Like in Orlando, there's a legacy agreement that part of the tourism tax, there was a hospitality tax on every hotel room in Orlando. And when that was instigated and set up 20 something years ago, it was agreed that that money would then go to support and fund Visit Orlando. So that's an example. And there's a couple other places, there's quite a few places in the world where that's what happens, where the hospitality tax, a portion of it has been designated to go to a tourism entity. But that's being challenged more and more and more. There's a big legal battle even in Orlando about their situation. So that's not guaranteed anymore. And when that money starts to get, because what states are doing and what cities are doing is they're starting to look at that and saying, God, we've got holes in the road. We don't have enough schools. We don't have enough this. And we're giving all this money to these guys. And, and they don't really have much to show for it because they've got a market, especially there, where it's driven by Universal, driven by Disney, driven by SeaWorld. It's pretty hard for them to say, oh, people are coming because of something we're doing. That's really tough. And I think more and more groups are going to have that same conversation coming. And some will not survive. Others, if they're smart, will find a way to provide their own money, their own funding by doing things a little differently than it's always been done. And those ones will be able to survive. But if you're not doing that, you're not going to make it.
So if a tourism bureau wanted to get serious about AI now, where should it start? The strategy, the talent, the governance, or the data?
Yeah, probably everything, right? Which I know sounds like an overwhelming answer, but they do need to decide that. I think the strategy is probably a place where they've got to start, and they've got to recognize that you're not going to be able to sit back and just take money from taxes or from governments and not be able to have something to show for it. So I think the strategy has to shift from just being an awareness provider who supports all these third parties to being a much more proactive, financially driven, business focused entity that actually does try and help people plan and book their vacations. And it could be a mix of private, public, but you need to be able to do something that validates that. So I think if the strategy was different, Gary, I think you would see AI a lot more. You'd see them exploring things like AI a lot more. It's the sort of lackadaisical kind of like no real skin in the game. I think that allows people to sit back and not do anything. Because like I said, if you were a private organization and you were having some of these issues, you'd be doing something about it. So that's the first thing. I think the strategy has to change.
So let's talk about that a little deeper. What do you think, Frank? What mindset shift matters more than any single technology investment? What do they need to do differently?
I think they need to try and focus on capturing and owning the visitor, just like a company would, right? So, I think when you hear the complaints from the opponents of tourism bureaus, I don't agree with them either, because what those guys are saying is, people would come here on their own. And anyone who says that is not aware of look, when it was the 1950s and you lived in the US and you wanted to go to the beach, where'd you go? You went to Florida, you went to California. That's where you went. I mean, but the world is not that way now. You Google the word beach, Google the word beach vacation. And that'll take you to the Gold Coast of Australia. It'll take you to Costa Rica. It'll take you to Dominican Republic. I mean, I could go on and on and on under beach vacation. You're going to get, so the competitive nature of the business has changed. And so anyone living anywhere, people have become a lot more open to traveling, even traveling long distances so, it's a different world than it used to be. So I think these entities, though, need to start working on how do you compete, right? So in my newsfeed this morning, I was seeing that, there's places that their tourism numbers are through the roof, this past year, and areas that are full of geopolitical messes, like Morocco and Egypt, their numbers are way up. And,
it's well,
crazy, right?
My daughter's an influencer, and she goes around, she works with Virgin and a number of the Virgin cruises, et cetera. But, she told me she went to Morocco.
Yeah.
And as a kid, we didn't talk about going to Morocco, as you said. Why did that happen? Is Morocco that good? that they're attracting visitors? Is that what's happened? And they've really upped the game. They're
They've
grabbing
upped the
it.
game. They've upped the game, but it's not enough to just up. You have to up the game in this business on multiple levels. You can't just up the game by adding new resorts. A lot of people, oh, we'll add some new resorts that are high end and very well. That's nice, but if people don't know about them, they're still not going to come and find those resorts. And if people don't know that your destination can still be safe, if people don't have a way, like airlift is a huge a massive issue. Like you have places like, beautiful places, for example, in Africa, on the coasts of Africa, but getting there is terribly difficult, and people worry about safety. So, they struggle. But if you can get all those pieces, and that's what these entities should be doing, is bringing all of these pieces together, so that people know it's easy. People know they can fly there easy. They work with the airline. The airline offers a promotion. The entity offers a promotion. They work on collaboration to make the destination seem attractive. And that's what these entities are doing. That's what Morocco, Egypt, as you know from working with us, that the Middle East is really strong for us because they are making decisions. And the other thing they have is they don't have a lot of legacy baggage like the other like Europe and the US. They're building these tourism strategies from scratch, and they've been doing it over the past couple years, and they've invested billions of dollars. And so they're very AI forward. They're very technology forward. And that's the difference, so they're spending money on different things, on smarter things, I think, than what a lot of the other legacy groups are probably doing.
So, final question, Frank: is AI the greatest threat tourism institutions have ever faced, or their last best opportunity to reinvent themselves?
Can I say both again? Because I think it depends, right? I think it depends on your approach. I think it is a phenomenal opportunity if you can get on board with that and do the things quickly that you need to do, so it becomes like an integral part of your organization. And think about that. The consumers want that capability. They want to be able to be on to be able to chat, even if it's with an AI generative chatbot at 1 a.m. in the morning when they want that ability. So if you can do that and you can line up what you offer with what they want, you're going to be successful. So it's a huge opportunity. However, it is also a threat because more and more of your private sector competitors are going to be going after those same customers, and they're going to be getting smarter at how they interact and take care of those customers. So the window is limited, and as to how much time they have to really get up to speed with that.
So finally, let's talk about how Simplenight can help them.
I think the most exciting thing for me about Simplenight is this ability to not just have the AI capability, which helps people to build a vacation at your destination, but it also gives you a lot of strategic control. And what I mean by that is we're the only solution that would allow an entity to, sell people who are on one hand, you might have a resort or a hotel or an airline. It's very cutting edge technology wise. But at the same time, you might have a lot of local entrepreneurs who offer deep sea fishing trips or cooking experiences or hikes in the mountains. And we can connect both of those and put them on the website, on the white label, and they can be side by side. And the number one thing driving travel now is authentic experiences. And so the big challenge a lot of these guys face is, how do I get Jose's taco class or Manuel's deep sea fishing charter? How do I get them to show up on my digital platform when they don't even have a website? They don't even have a Facebook page. Well, Simplenight has a very, very easy way to do that. And they can get pre-arrival bookings. People can learn about those experiences, and then what happens is the scrutiny for your organization goes away, because now all of the politicians, what do they see? They see you supporting all the small businesses. But that's what they want. That's what they want the tourism entity to do. And so it's really exciting that there's this, for me, there's this very high-tech side of Simplenight with the AI and the white label and all of that, which is amazing. But then there's this very altruistic thing too that allows entities to put money back into their community. And so that's the reason that, I think we're getting traction, and the reason people are talking to us.
So, Frank, I want to thank you for such an honest and insightful
Thank
conversation.
you. Of course.
AI won't wait for bureaucracy, politics, or comfort zones. The destinations that succeed will be the ones willing to rethink how they govern, decide, and serve travelers before someone else does it ahead of them. So I want to thank all of you out there. We are now on Amazon. We are on Google. We are on Apple Podcasts. So check us out. We're all over the place. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. And I'll be back to you again soon with another exciting edition of Simplenight Presents. My name is Gary Fowler, and I'm your host. Thank you, Frank, and thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thanks all.